Hey there, and welcome to the Solo Book Club, where I, Jimmy O, review your favorite books and conduct a book club all by myself. Let's get started with our next book. Hello. For today's book club, we're going to review The Trial by Franz Kafka. So this book begins with our main character, Joseph K. And the main passage that you see is this. Somebody must have slandered Joseph K. For one morning, without having done anything wrong, he was arrested. That's kind of how the book starts off. We learn that it's Joseph K.'s 30th birthday. A few ununiformed guards come to his house and basically let him know that he's under arrest. Joseph K. demands to speak to a supervisor. Then they summon him before someone that they call the inspector, who's in a bedroom in another room in the apartment where he lives. It kind of seems like he's renting a room from one person. Either way, this inspector is in that other person's room, and just like the guards before that couldn't tell Joseph K. anything about his arrest, the inspector also tells Joseph K. that he has no idea what he's being charged with or why he's being placed under arrest. But he essentially tells him, look, this is a kind of arrest where you can go about living your life, continue as normal, and once you are summoned, you have to show up to court. So next we have Joseph K. go to work. He works at a bank where he's the head cashier. And while he's at work, he's being told that he's going to have several hearings that are going to take place on his case. And the first one's going to take place on that following Sunday, and they're going to happen in every couple Sundays after that. So at that point, he thinks he's going to be told what he's being charged with, what crime, and no such thing happens. He's never informed of the crime that he's charged with. As a matter of fact, they don't even tell him what time he's supposed to appear in court. They just give him an address, and it's not an address to a ministerial building. It's just basically a big apartment complex. So he goes to this apartment complex the next Sunday, and he sees a washerwoman, and she tells him, okay, yeah, you're here for the trial. It's upstairs. So she basically takes him up to a room, and when he gets there, there is a person who's called the magistrate, who scolds him for being late, even though they never told him what time to be there. So while he's there in front of the magistrate, Joseph K. is protesting what's going on. He's protesting his treatment, the fact that he hasn't been charged with anything, or that he doesn't know what he's being charged with, and he's telling all these people that they are corrupt, and basically, while he's doing all that, the magistrate who's there is telling him, look, by doing all this, you're damaging your case. You need to participate in this hearing in order for it to go well for you. Otherwise, it's going to go badly. So after that, he leaves. Nothing else happens after that. He expects to be at this same courthouse the next Sunday, so he goes there even though he never received any kind of summons or citation telling him to get there. He ends up going to the same house, to the same apartment complex. He goes to the same room, and when he gets there, he sees that there's nobody there, just the people who live in that specific apartment. Then he comes to find out that there is a lady living there, and her husband is the court's usher. And this usher guy, he tells Joseph K. that he can help him by showing him where the law court's offices are. So at that point, he's starting to feel really tired, and he goes to the law offices, and while he's there, he begins to faint. And there are dozens of people who are watching, people who are involved with their own court cases, even though they're not at a hearing. They're there with their own cases at the law court offices, and they see him, and they kind of know that he's going through the same thing. They probably understand that he's at the beginning of it. They escort him out, and he just recovers. A few days later, while he's at work, the craziest thing happens. He hears some sound coming from a storeroom inside of his office building. And inside the storeroom are the two officers who arrested him, and they're completely naked, and they're being whipped by some person because of the way that they allegedly mistreated Joseph K. when he was being arrested. So he complained about them, and apparently this was their punishment in a storeroom in a bank. After this, we meet Joseph K. And his uncle, who is apparently a very rich man, and he is very concerned for Joseph and the charges against him. He knows that he has been charged with a crime, and that he is, supposed to be going to these hearings at court. So because of this concern, his uncle takes him to see a defense attorney whose name is Dr. Hold. When they get to Dr. Hold, they meet up with his maid, and she tells them that Dr. Hold is really sick, and that he is conducting all of his business from his bed, and that he's very interested in taking up Joseph K. as a client. So they end up retaining Dr. Hold, and while he's there, Joseph K. is paying more attention to the housekeeper, whose name is Lenny, and she ends up luring him away from the room, and she seduces him, and they start having sex and making out. It's just one of these strange things that happens to Joseph K. So while she's seducing him, she also tells him, it's probably going to be best if you just confess your guilt. So that's just one of the main things that happens with Lenny and with Joseph K. Several weeks later, it's really difficult for Joseph K. to focus on his work. He thinks that his lawyer isn't doing anything on his behalf, even though he is. He just doesn't see the work. He doesn't see the fruit of that labor. And one of his clients at the bank says that he too had issues, and that he might seek the help out of a guy named Titorelli. So Titorelli is the painter for the court, and they said, okay, well, if anyone can help you, it's Titorelli. So he meets Titorelli, and Titorelli ends up telling him, essentially, there are only a few different options that can happen as a result of dealing with this court. You can be acquitted, which never happens, and being acquitted means that your charges are dropped, and you can just go on as before. And then there's this thing called an ostensible acquittal, which is basically you're not found guilty, you're not found innocent, but the charges are kind of just laying low, and at any point they might come back. But either way, it just prolongs the sentencing period, which in those days, apparently sentencing meant death. So this type of acquittal is what they think that Joseph K. needs. So Joseph K. runs to see his attorney, Dr. Hold, and he kind of tells him that that's what he's planning on telling him that's what he wants. So while he goes to see Dr. Hold, he meets another client of his whose name is Block, who's a merchant. And what's crazy is that Block tells Joseph K. that he has a case as well, and that his case has been going on for 5 years, and that this Dr. Hold isn't the only attorney that he's engaged to represent him in his case. He has several other attorneys, and he's spending all this money to try to get some kind of result for himself. But while they're there, what's crazy is that Dr. Hull, the lawyer, is trying to show how he dominates Block, because apparently Block is there to fire him since he has several other attorneys. But he kind of domineers Block and prevents him from firing him. And Joseph sees all of this. So later on, he's at work, and while he's at work, they tell him that there is an Italian client who's in town, and they need him to show this Italian client the local cathedral, and for him to arrive at a specific time. So he goes to the cathedral, and he's ready to show this Italian client around, but he doesn't show up. And instead, Joseph K. starts walking around, and he starts talking to a priest. And this priest tells Joseph K. that he is a chaplain at the prison and that he knows about Joseph K.'s case. Again, he doesn't tell him what he's being charged with or what's going on with the case, except for that he knows that it is going badly and that by this point, the court is going to consider him guilty. So more time passes, and we're basically at Joseph K.'s 31st birthday, meaning it's been a year since the book first began. So two men show up at his house, and he goes with them. He doesn't put up a fight. Although he doesn't really understand what's going on. He thinks it has to do with his case. He doesn't know where they're taking him. He assumes they're going to a court, or that he's going to be placed under arrest or imprisoned. But instead, they take him to an abandoned quarry, and they have him sit with his head on a stone. They end up passing a knife to each other, these two men, back and forth. And at the end, they end up executing Joseph K. They push a knife into his heart, and they twist it. And this is essentially where this book ends. Okay, now we're moving on to the book club portion of this book, The Trial by Franz Kafka. And the answer to the first question, which is, did you like the book, is kinda. And the reason I'm so hesitant to give such a concrete response is because this book was extremely frustrating. I mean, you hear of Joseph K.'s struggles to deal with bureaucracy. I mean, it's something that he has so little control over, and any action that he takes can adversely affect his case, and he doesn't know how. He doesn't know why. And it's just really a really frustrating thing that's going on with him. And one of the main things that I got from this book is that, bureaucracy, when it is put in a state in which it can be accessed, and you have to go through, all these undercover, secret, and, just in the know type situations in order to get around it. I mean, it's just really frustrating. And, that's kind of how I felt throughout this entire book. It kind of gave me a sense of frustration and a sense of anxiety and helplessness, desperation even. And these are real emotions that I felt. And it's even compounded by the fact that I am an attorney in life, and I know how the system works here in the U.S. Yeah, it has bureaucracy. Yeah, it can be frustrating, but nothing in the way that Joseph experienced his trial. Basically, one, he never knew what he was charged with, has no idea, and ended up dying not knowing why he died and why they ended up executing him. Two, they end up not at some ministerial building. They end up at a random tenement in some random town, in some random person's house. It was just strange the way that it went. They didn't tell him what time to be there. He just had to show up. They scolded him for being late. All of this was just frustrating. And it's hard to say that you enjoy that, because I really didn't. But I did enjoy the fact that it brought out all these emotions in me, because I think that's, one of the main goals for authors. They want to produce some kind of emotion in you, and this book definitely did that. So did I like the contents of the book? Did I like the way it made me feel? No. But do I like the fact that it did make me feel something? Absolutely. That is probably one of the best things that you can do as an author, is make somebody feel something, and I definitely felt something in this book. Okay, the next question is, if you could ask the author of this book anything about it, what would it be? And to me, the main question I would ask is, what in your life caused you to write this book? Because apparently the author, Kafka, he never intended this book to be published. He never intended for anyone to read it. He actually asked for people to burn it after he died. That way nobody could see it. But in the end, his friends ended up publishing it. He's dead. What is he going to do to us? So my question would be, what happened to you? What personally did you go through, if anything, having to deal with this type of bureaucracy or this type of situation? This took place back in the 1910s and early 1920s. That time period is allegedly when he wrote this book. I'm not sure what was going on in Germany per se. I know it was the advent of Nazism and the totalitarian state that Hitler created. This was all leading up to that. Was this the type of situation that you had in that time period? Did you have to go through these types of situations anytime you had any legal actions against you? And if so, maybe that's why people welcomed Adolf Hitler. That's why they ended up making him the chancellor. Maybe that's why these things ended up happening. Who knows? My question to him would be, just what happened to you? Tell me, what did they do to you? Why would you write such a book? And what inspired you to make such a book about desperation and that would evoke all these feelings? What happened? Okay, the next question is, what did you think of the title? So the title of this book is The Trial. Again, I don't know if that is what Kafka named the book, or if that's just what they called it based on the substance of the book. So what I thought of it is I thought it was the perfect title for it, because what happened was anything but perfect. What happened in the book was anything but a trial, which is really cool, because I went in expecting for this book to be, an old-timey true crime story. But no, it ended up being a story about the intricacies of bureaucracy and how these screwed up governments can screw up people's lives. So I thought that was a pretty brilliant title to it, because what happens isn't what you would actually see in a normal trial. You don't have one judge, you don't have a jury, you don't have witnesses. That didn't happen here. The sentencing phase, who came up with the sentence? Why was his sentence death? All these things that you would expect from a trial just didn't happen. And I thought it was pretty brilliant that they would call it that, in spite of the fact that what happened was more of a farcical trial, something that doesn't give you justice, something that doesn't give equity or a sense of winning, of righteousness, and that's what I think of that title. The next question is, what is your favorite quote from this book? Well, I annotated several, but this is the one that I felt like I could relate to the most, and it goes like this. They are talking about things of which they don't have the slightest understanding anyway. It's only because of their stupidity that they're able to be so sure of themselves. The reason that I thought of this one was because, this book is about frustrations and about having to deal with, the maze that is a bureaucracy. The reason that specific quote resonated with me is because I've been in those situations. Again, I'm a lawyer. I have to deal with the law. I have to deal with rules. And most of the time, you have a baseline of rules that you have to know. And everyone knows these rules no matter what side of the equation that you're on, whether you're on the plaintiff or defense side, it doesn't matter. The rules are pretty simple. But sometimes you have folks that are just dumb and they don't understand the rules, they don't get the rules, they don't even know the baseline. And because they don't even know the baseline, they start doing things trying to attack your case, and they're just doing it in a way where now, because you assume everyone knows these basic rules, now you have to go out and look up these basic rules and explain to a judge why these people are wrong. And to me, it's just so frustrating, and it really made me think of a situation that I've been in before when I was reading that quote, and that's why I decided to share that one, because a lot of times these stupid people, they're just making things harder for you and for themselves, and that's because they are so sure of themselves. They think that they know what's going on, but in reality they don't know anything. And I can really relate to that as far as Joseph K's situation goes. Okay, the next question is, what do you think was the purpose of this author writing this book? I think the purpose was to kind of highlight the fact that things aren't going well in his society. Things aren't going right. Things are frustratingly unfair, undemocratic, unjust, and I think he's trying to highlight that. I don't know if it was an exaggeration, if everything that happened in the book was, just as it would happen in his time, or if it was some type of exaggeration. But either way, I think the point is that he's trying to convey the fact that things can be better, things should be better, and things shouldn't be as frustrating as the character Joseph K has to live with this entire process. I think that's the point. I think he was trying to maybe make some kind of change in the political landscape, the judicial landscape, whatever it may be, for his time period. Even though he never published the book while he was alive, I think that nowadays, since its publication, people point to the frustrations of bureaucracy because point to this book because a lot of times you see things happening in your everyday lives. Anytime you encounter some kind of government agency, you have to fill out this form and get into this specific line. Anytime you have to go get your driver's license renewed in person, it's like line after line, form after form, and things should just be made a lot easier. Obviously, it's not the same. The process is different as far as getting a license and going through a trial without due process, without being charged, and then being sentenced to death for a crime that you don't even know what it was. Obviously a little bit different, but there are things that we can take from as far as this book goes. All right, the next question is, what did you think of the ending? And wow, yeah, the ending to this book was totally expected. I mean, I didn't, by the end of it, I knew that nothing good was going to come of this entire trial process. I knew that something unjust was going to happen, and that's exactly what ended up happening in the book. Joseph K ends up being executed. he doesn't know why. He wasn't present for the process to determine his guilt. He wasn't present for the process in determining his sentence, which was death. He took no part in that, and he doesn't know who took part in that. Nobody, as far as he knows, was elected to office. As far as the person judging him, there were no juries, none of his peers that were able to determine whether or not he was guilty or innocent. And as far as the process itself goes, it was just so maddening. You had to go through, all this bureaucracies. Nobody was there to help you. The lawyers were seemingly useless. They didn't really know what was going on. Some people had several lawyers, and at that point, even they didn't know what was going on. You would imagine if you had 5 lawyers, you'd have at least 5 people advocating for you. But just like we saw with the character Block, he had no clue. And he'd been going through the process for 5 years, still with no idea what was going on. Then he meets the painter, who tells him his best option was to get an ostensible acquittal, which means that these charges can come back. They're just kind of hanging over your head for the rest of your life. They can come back at any point. That's not real justice. And it was completely unsurprising to understand that Joseph K. ends up dying, and he had no clue why. I mean, that was just completely. You could tell that the book was heading in that direction. I know that Kafka left this book unfinished, so maybe he would have added more to it. But as it stands now, I mean, it was totally the right move. It was exactly what you would expect from a book that caused so much frustrations as far as reading about these bureaucracies and such goes. Thank you so much for watching Solo Book Club with me, Jimmy O. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. As always, you're welcome to engage in the comment area. Let me know what you thought of the review. Let me know of any future books you want me to review on Solo Book Club with me, Jimmy O. And give me answers to the questions for the book club. I want to hear from you. As always, thank you to Ben Sound for the music. Mr. Sound, you're the best. And again, thank you for watching Solo Book Club with me, Jimmy O.